My name is Lorilei. Lorilei Guillory. Lorilei. Do you know what that means? Do you know what that means? As I understand, Lorilei was this spirit, this ghost, and she lived deep under a river in Germany, Europe. And she would lure men to their death with her beauty and her sad songs. Lorilei. And that's my name too. On February 7th, 1992, my son was coming home on the school bus, Jeremy, and I remember he wanted a bite to eat, and he wanted to watch cartoons, and at that time I was staying with a friend of mine, and she also had a young child, and he wasn't letting Jeremy watch cartoons. I remember Jeremy was very agitated. He wanted to watch those cartoons, you know what small children can be like. So he wanted to get his BB gun and go out and play. And so he pulled a chair close up to the closet, and he climbed up to get his BB gun down, and I said, hang on. Hang on there. Hold on. Let me get that down for you. And I climbed up, and I got that BB gun down for him, and I gave it to him. It wasn't unusual for Jeremy and a friend of his to go and shoot BBs at the edge of the woods. They would do that often, and so he went off to play. It wasn't much later, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't know. In February it gets dark very early, so I went out to look for him, and where I lived, there are 6 houses in a row, and everybody knew everybody, and we all had children, and my brother's lived there 30 years, he still lives there today. And so I just went and started knocking on the houses closest to mine, and it was real quiet that Friday afternoon. Very quiet. Unusually so, huh? So, I naturally just went, and I was knocking on the houses closest to me. And when I got to the 2-story house, when I knocked on the door, Ricky Langley answered the door. Now, I do not know who this person is. I've never seen Ricky Langley before. I had no idea who he is. I just naturally went to the house closest to mine and knocked on that first. And Ricky Langley answered the door, and I asked, well, have you seen my son? And he said, who's your son? And I said, Jeremy. And he said, oh, no, he's not here. I said, well, fine, I'll just go to my brother's and look for him there. Would you like to come in and use the phone? I struggled inside myself for a little bit. I did. I struggled, and then I thought, no, it's okay, I'll just go to my brother's. And then I said, yes, I think I will use that phone. And I went in and I called my brother. And when his line was busy, I just shut the phone and I left. And I went to my brother's and I asked them, I said, have you seen Jeremy? And when they said no, that's when I thought. I said, oh my God, that child has gone into those woods with his BB gun and he can't find his way out. That's what I thought. That's what I thought then. At that point, I made lots of calls. I made lots of phone calls. I can't remember who I called the sheriff department. I called the fire department. I called the whole lot of people. Good God! I mean, my son is lost in the woods, and we've just got to go and find him. And I wanted to go into the woods and find him myself, but I didn't know my way in the woods, so I was terrified. I wanted to go in and look for him myself. At that point, I remember I took my sister-in-law's car, and I drove the car deep down to the edge of the woods, and I shone the lights into the woods, and I shouted his name out real loud, Jeremy! Jeremy! And I was real silent, just in case I could see anything or hear anything, you know, anything. And I don't remember. I'm sorry. I don't remember a whole lot about that day. I remember the sheriff department came and the fire department came and my daddy came. My daddy came to pick me up that evening, and that's when he first found out. And I said, Daddy, Jeremy's lost in the woods. I can't find him. Daddy, Jeremy's lost in the woods. And he just left immediately. He went out to search for him, and you know, it was advertised. Good God, not advertised, but it was in the local news, and anybody and everybody who knew those woods, they were out there looking for this wicked boy, and Jeremy was 6 years old. At that point, do you know what I was thinking? Okay, I was thinking, Jeremy went with his school to see a dinosaur exhibit that day. And I was thinking to myself, maybe he's hurt. Maybe he's just fallen asleep somewhere out there. Maybe he's lost. Maybe he's looking. I mean, I knew he was scared and lonely. I just went, maybe he was unconscious. It just went on and on and on and on and on in my head. I recall thinking, I need a drink. I'm sorry. If I recall correctly, Ricky Langley. I sat on the porch of that two-story house and he bought me some liquor. I don't know, it was about that much liquor. I don't know what it was. I just downed it because I was losing it. I was completely going over the edge, and so I just downed it. And the search went on 3 days and 3 nights. You know, it went as far as helicopters up in the sky and 2 kinds of dogs from 2 kinds of penitentiaries were called to search in 2 different kinds of ways. And the Marine Division was called out. You know, the Marine Division was called out to look in the canal. We have a canal back in our woods, and it just went from one extreme to the other. And throughout all of this, it never once crossed my mind that my son was dead. My mind went to all kinds of places. It did. It wandered to all kinds of places. I thought he's hurt, he's unconscious somewhere. I knew he was scared, and he was lonely, and he was hungry. And on the third day, it went as far as me thinking, you know what, maybe he was walking on that highway and somebody's picked him up. And I just prayed to the Lord that that person didn't have kids and wanted a child and wouldn't hurt. That's as far as my mind would allow me to go. It just never once occurred to me at all that he was dead. I don't remember a whole lot about that time really. I just remember where my mind was just sort of taking me, and Yeah, well, on the third day, the FBI called me down to the sheriff's office, and they wanted me to go there, which I did. I did go there. And then they questioned me. They questioned me about 7 days prior to the disappearance of my son. Everything, every little step I took, everybody I met, anybody who might be angry with me, everyone I met, and any little thing, everything, real thorough, you know, up to getting a glass of water, coming back and sitting there. And when I got to that part about knocking on the 2-story house and Ricky Langley opening the door, they just got up and they left. You see that name, Ricky Langley? That meant something to them. This woman, this parole officer, she said he was on the loose and the last address he'd been seen was in our area. That name, Ricky Langley, meant something to them. He was in violation of his parole, and he had a long, long history of being a pedophile. What do you know about the boy? I only saw it on the news. Now you look me in the eye and you tell me what you know about the disappearance of that boy. Have you killed that boy? Have you killed him?
I have killed him.
Where's the body?
In my room, in my closet.
And it was. So while I was detained in the sheriff's office, he was taking them to where my son's body was, in that 2-story house, in that room, in that closet, and had been there for 3 whole days. The command post, not 50 yards from the door. Oh Lord, oh God, when the detective came to me and told me, oh, we found your son, I was like, oh my God, where is he? Where is he?
He's dead.
I just freaked. I just freaked. I remember I backed to the corner of the room. I just backed to the corner of the room, and I remember scrunching down in pain, you know, deep inside pain, and just screaming. sheriff's office and she tried to comfort me, but I just wanted to go! I just wanted to go! I didn't know where. I didn't know where. I just wanted to go. I tried to see Jeremy. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see him. I felt like I needed to see my son. They wouldn't allow me. I come to find out he was strangled with fishing line around his throat. The cause of death was strangulation and suffocation. Fishing line around his throat and a dirty sock was stuffed down his throat. That's the cause of death on the death certificate. That's the cause of death on the death certificate. I was in a living hell. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. You don't want to know what happened to my Jeremy. You don't want to know what happened to him. What the police and the papers said. I don't know how I coped. I guess I just I guess I just existed in a walking coma. I guess I don't remember. I was 3 months pregnant at that time. That may have had something to do with helping me carry on. I don't know. I don't remember. I just did what I had to do. I just did what I had to do. And I would think of Jeremy. He was in that closet. And I would bring Ricky Langley to my mind. I would think about that bottle of liquor he gave me. And how he patted and caressed my dead boy's head. It was in his confession. And I wanted to kill him myself. I wanted to kill him! I wanted to take him with my bare hands and kill him! I don't know this personally. I don't know this personally. But my sister-in-law, she works at the DA's office, and I was told that when she found out, she got a shotgun and she wanted to shoot to kill. She wanted to shoot to kill. I told her Jeremy was dead, and she passed out. And when she came to, she got a shotgun to shoot to kill. It took several members of the family and friends just to hold her back, and that's the way I felt. I felt that way myself. I wanted to kill her myself. That's the last time. That time between Ricky Langley's arrest and his trial, the last time I was in a lost place. I was in a lost place, alone and in a cold and dark and unrestful place. When Jeremy died, it took all my faith. It took all my faith in trust and in the goodness of this world. How did this happen? And I went deeper and deeper into depression. And then there were those nightmares. Horrible nightmares. I was stuck. I was stuck on Jeremy's death. And what must he have gone through? They were just stuck in my head. I had no memory before that. No, they were just, no! No! It is stuck in my head, just stuck like a broken record. It was all downhill from there. All downhill. Alcohol, drugs, crack cocaine. I went seeking crack cocaine on the first anniversary of my son's death. And I found it. And it bit me real hard. And I continued it for several years. I've been to the depths of hell. That's not just a saying. I have been to the depths of hell. Then the trial came around. I held my head high, and I went to that trial, and I sat in that courtroom. I held Ricky Langley and the system accountable. And then they brought Ricky Langley in. The room grew real tense. I just stared at my shoes. I couldn't look up. I couldn't raise my, I don't know if you can imagine this. It was as if it was a portrait of evil, and looking at it would just be too blinding. But I do remember an outburst. He stood up and he said, "I want to die." I remember that very vividly. I want to die. I wasn't in the courtroom when they pronounced him guilty. No, I was in my motel room across the road. I didn't want his blood on my hands. You know, they go after child killers the way they go after no one else. So it's no surprise. It's no surprise that Ricky Langley got the death sentence. Do you want to know what I thought? Do you want to know what I thought? I thought, God bloody relax! I learned some things during that trial. I'd seen some pictures of my son when they found him, and it was very hairy. Why didn't get it, live or die? My pain was so deep. Why should I care about him? And that was that. It was over. Ricky Langley had killed Jeremy, and we were guilty, and no one disputed that, and we were all going to go home. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't closed. I was still lost then, maybe, I don't know. I was still a victim then. I'm not a victim now. I say that. I'm not a victim. I'm the victim's mother. One day, I was taking care of Brock, Jeremy's brother, and I had things on my mind. I had Ricky Langley on my mind. I realized I didn't want him to die. Don't misunderstand me here. Don't misunderstand me. I definitely feel Ricky Langley should never walk the streets again, knowing what I know about pedophilia, and that there is no cure, the progression of the disease, that it leads to the murder of little children. I definitely feel Ricky Langley is a danger and a threat. And I don't want some doctor down the line letting him loose into civilization. But he had a disease. I knew about diseases from my alcoholism and my drugs. I didn't want him punished for a disease. Langley had a disease, and he had no one. I wanted to support him. I don't want us to kill him. I felt compassion for Ricky Langley after learning some things about him. family, huh? Family, parents. Wait, this here. That's where it all begins. Ricky Langley's parents were poor folk. Very, very poor folk. They lived out in the woods with nothing, just a stove. Rough folk. Now one day, they're driving in their car, and the little one, she drops something, so the father stoops down to pick it up. Now he's drunk, and he's driving real fast, and that car, it drives right off the highway, and a post trail goes right through it. Now the father, he's okay, he pulls through. But the mama, she was in a cast for 7 days, and 7 nights she was in a coma. When she came through, the cast was from her neck to her legs. And she opened her eyes and she asked, "Where are my babies?" And when the nurse was silent, she knew. She knew. Little one, gone. And Oscar Lee, the apple of her eye, their boy. You must understand, please understand this. He was standing at the back of that car when that car wreck happened, and that post train just went straight through him. Now Bessie, the mother, she's in this hospital called Charity. And Charity had a reputation. Let's just say she spent months on end lying in pools of her own old blood, watching roaches crawl. She got an infection in one of her bones. They started her on antibiotics, codeine, Demerol. And then there was that cast. That cast would trouble her. She would want it off. She would need it off so she could scratch her tummy. So they cut a hole in the plaster. And that was when Bessie got pregnant again. Now Bessie was in that cast 5 months. When she got pregnant, she didn't tell anyone. Maybe she didn't know. I don't know. Maybe she didn't know. But operation after operation, and X-ray after X-ray, and the drugs she was given, every drug imaginable on earth, you name it, she was given it. All in the first trimester of her pregnancy. Do I need to tell you who was in that womb? Ricky. Now the doctors and the nurses of Charity Hospital, they didn't find out Bessie was pregnant until she was 6 months pregnant and about to fit to crack open like an eggshell. And even then, they kept giving her antibiotics, codeine, Seconal, Demerol. They pumped her with drugs all the way through. And when that cast was finally cut open, Bessie said to her sister, "Oh, you should have heard that belly. Oh." The doctors at Charity urged her to abort the child because she had more bones broken than full, I guess. They told her the child would be born with no arms and no legs. But the daddy, he was a good religious fellow, and he wanted another son. He did not permit Bessie to have that abortion. He didn't. Maybe they did the right thing. I don't know. Maybe they did the right thing. But the consequences? The consequences? Ricky was born undersized. He still is undersized. He can't talk properly. He's colorblind. He's all but blind. He was incubated in barbiturates. He was drowned in barbiturates. And from the very start, he can't remember not having headaches. And his parents talking about this little boy called Oscar Lee. Bessie had TB. So Ricky was raised by relatives. He saw his mama on and off, but whenever he saw his mother, she was hysterical. Ricky grew up watching Bessie hysterical and having to be dragged away from the graveyard where she would try to dig Oscar Lee up with her bare hands. You see, the trouble was, Oscar Lee and Ricky looked identical when they were little. But Ricky wasn't Oscar Lee. People started hearing him talk to Oscar Lee. He would say,
Oscar Lee ain't happy.
At first they thought it was a pretend playmate, but it wasn't. Ricky's dead brother would come to him, not as a ghost, but real, to comfort him when he was lonely. Oscar Lee's body always stayed 6 years old because he was dead. But he grew up, he became smart in other ways. Later on, he would take over Ricky's body and make him do things he didn't want and say things he didn't want and make him feel bad. By 6th grade, Ricky was putting up his messages on the classroom bulletin board.
My name is not Ricky. It's Oscar Lee.
And then, there was interference. You see, the most important thing that ever happened in Ricky's life happened before he was born. But the interference, Ricky was small, so he was easy to manipulate. He was weak. The reports say he was sexually molested all the way through his childhood. By a man he called his uncle, and by younger men he called his cousins. They would take him to this trailer deep in the woods, where they would sodomize him repeatedly. It wasn't a childhood. Not one you'd wish on anyone anyway. Obviously, this is only part of the story. But after what I've told you, is it any surprise that Ricky Langley has sexually molested children? And not just a few. Hundreds of little boys and little girls in Georgia, here in Louisiana, over many, many years. What kind of a world is this? What kind of a world is this? Where a man scarcely bigger than a mouse can sexually abuse even one child? Who's looking out for these children? Who's looking out for these children? You? Who's looking out for Ricky Langley? want to look out. I think of a child in a womb, and you don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a doctor to know that X-rays are not what a child inside needs. And we all think we can see through him, right? But he is one of God's creatures. And this must end. It must end. Who was Ricky Langley speaking to? That day when my boy went knocking on his door, who was Ricky Langley speaking to? There was no one in the house with him, he was alone. Ricky was speaking to Oscar Lee. And when Jeremy was there at the door, he thought it was Oscar Lee come to make him feel bad. And Ricky didn't want his dead brother talking to him anymore. Sweet Lord. This man is not a man. He is someone who's had things done to him. And he's as unhappy as they come. You know, all his life, he's tried to take his life. He's OD'd, he's tried to shoot himself with a 22 in the head, and he missed. He stood on that highway, waiting to be run over, but the cars would honk and swerve around him. His arms, his wrists, a mess of scars. And now, some real man wants to do the job for him. Some real man, like his daddy, or those doctors at charity, or his uncle, or his cousins. These real men, they're the ones who flick the switch in this world, aren't they? I ain't making much sense now, am I? Did I tell you who Lorilei was? She's this, I was told, she's this huge rock that looms over a river in Germany. And in their mind, they made this rock into a lady because she was so much bigger than them. On this rock, I knew I had to meet Ricky Langley. I knew I had to meet Ricky Langley one-on-one. How? Don't ask me why. I don't know why. I don't know how. I had no cash. I had no cash to come here. I had no means. But I knew I had to meet him. And suddenly the doors were open and bang! It was just meant to be. Yes. I went to that prison on my own. I signed my name, Lorilei. I sat in that room and I watched this grey light, this fluorescent grey light just flicker on and off, on and off. And somebody handed me something in a styrofoam cup to eat, to drink. And I was just, I was sitting there. Yes, and then they brought him in. How did I view him? As Ricky Langley. Yes, as Ricky Langley. How did I see him? As a murderer. I mean, he's a murderer. He murdered my son. I couldn't raise my eyes. And that silence, it lasted till the trumpet sounded. Or so it seemed to me. So it seemed to me, at least. And then I raised my head. And I looked him square in the eye. And I said, I'm Lorilei, Jeremy's mother. Do you remember? Of course he did. Now, I realize I have to keep in mind my own source. I have to keep in mind my own source, and I can't 100%. I can't put my 100% trust into this man who has murdered my son. But I asked him questions. I asked him questions. All sorts of questions, lots of questions. Just one after the other, I asked him questions. And he answered them. He answered all of them. He did answer them. And then stuff came out that I didn't know about. Not even during the trial. For one, Jeremy not being molested. For 10 years, my God, for 10 long years, we'd all thought Jeremy'd been molested. And Ricky Langley says he did not molest Jeremy, and there's no, on the forensic and the autopsy, there's no trace of semen or anything, so I guess I believe him. Nobody told us that. Nobody told us that. It's a big deal, It's a big deal being misled and misguided into thinking he was sexually molested all these years. Why does it matter so much to me? My God only knows the nightmares I've been through. And murder is extreme enough, but to think what he must have gone through for 3 days, even for 3 days. I didn't know, because I didn't know if he died that Friday. I didn't know, I'm still confused about, the real facts of the case, and if there's anything I can do, it would be to seek the truth. I would, because I may never know. I may never know. I may never know. But I did know that in meeting Ricky Langley, I had stared something down. I felt a weight go. At the end of our meeting, I felt it was important. I think it was important for me to tell him where I stood, and I told him I opposed the death penalty, and I would help him. I would help him fight for his life, but I did say to him, Ricky, I will never allow you to walk the streets again. I will fight to the death to see you incarcerated and institutionalized. Do you know what he said?
I agree with you.
For some reason, he holds himself completely accountable to me. And it's not up to me, you know. I mean, I have an opinion. But his fate is not up to me. And then I said goodbye, and I stood up, and I walked out of that prison, and I thought to myself, Ricky Langley is somebody's son. I'm not going to just stand there and watch him be put down like that. The killing has to stop. One day, I decided to tell my family. So I was sitting with them, and they were all around me. And I told them, I said, you know what? I'm going to write to the DA, and I'm going to say, I, the victim's mother, do not want to impose the death penalty. Oh, the room became icy cold. My family's barely spoken to me since then. It's sad. It's sad. In a way, I've lost my family because of all of this. My son Brock is with me. My 10-year-old son Brock. He is with me. You know, when I was coming here from South Carolina, and I was very upset. So Brock turned to me and he said to me, Mama, why are you so sad? So I said to him, I told him how I felt about the death penalty and how important it was. And he said to me, Mama, just tell them everything you've said to me. Just like that. As simple as that. And I said, yes, I think that's what I'm going to do. Just tell them, Mama, just like you told me. Just tell them. Yes. And you see, my family just doesn't understand. And it's hard, it's really hard. It's hard to rise above all the hate. It's not easy. It's not easy. Well, there, the DA found out really fast, and then the phone calls just did not stop. Oh my God. I'd found a damn good way to get attention. Please, come here. We just want to talk to you. We just want to talk. We just want to talk. Oh my God. And then the threats began. You know, I had walked into this fiery furnace and I had to face it. They pulled out everything. My time with crack cocaine, alcohol, you know, they took Brock away from me. For a little while. And anything that they could say to keep me silent, they did it. They said it. And people, you know, when Jeremy died, people wrote me the most wonderful, warm letters, generous, kind letters. Those same people, the letters they wrote were vicious. Vicious and hard. Very hard. very hard. Well, I understand. You see, I understand the anger. I understand the anger. That's the world we all live in. That's the world I grew up in. That's the world Ricky Langley grew up in. A frightened world, an angry world. But you see, it's just that. It's that anger. It's that anger. It's that fear and that anger that I'm talking about. That fear and anger that it takes to kill somebody. That's what I'm talking about. So, amidst all this, I'm trying to build a stable life for myself and Brock, and then they called me for a retrial. I was going to have to go back to Louisiana, and I was going to have to give evidence again about that day in 1992. And when the time came to give a testimony, I was going to have to stand there and say that I did not want Ricky Langley killed. Not in my name, not in anybody's name. My God. If I thought I was walking a tangled path, I didn't know the half of it. I slept very badly that night. I slept very badly that night. Yes. You see, I've had people come to me and tell me that they have new evidence about what Ricky Langley did to my son that will make me change my mind. I've had Ricky Langley's defense file a motion saying that Lorilei has forgiven Ricky Langley, and that made my blood boil. I have not forgiven Ricky Langley. I have never said I have forgiven Ricky Langley. If anything, it's the opposite. They took their motion back, they did the right thing, but you see, can you see what they were doing? Can you see what they were doing? Can you see? They were trying to use me as a tool for their own devices, and I will not be used. I don't care, they can make me into a bad mother or anything. My position is simple. Ricky Langley is a bad man, he's a lost man. He murdered my son, I do not want him killed. So Brock and I, we packed our things and we sat in the car and we set off. We set off 950 miles from South Carolina to Lake Charles. And it wasn't easy. It was not easy. You know, Brock had to miss his SATs again. It wasn't easy for him. He's a child with special needs. And the DA was nervous. The DA was nervous. He knew I was opposing the death penalty, so he was nervous. I was nervous as well. I was also nervous. Ten years later, it was all going to happen again. Ricky Langley and me in that courtroom, and Jeremy, and in some ways, Oscar Lee too, telling our story to strangers. I concentrated real hard. And when the time came for me to give evidence, I stood up. I stood up and I remember I felt like I was in a bubble. I felt like I was in a bubble and I could hear myself speaking from outside. And then they asked me, do you think Ricky Langley is mentally sick? And I said, I think Ricky Langley has cried out for help many, many, many times. And for whatever reason, his family, society, and the system has failed him. I think he is sick. And he has cried out for help many times. And even as I can hear my child's death cry, I can also hear Ricky Langley's cry for help. And the room was real silent all around me. And Ricky just stared at the floor. On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant Langley? Not guilty, Your Honor. Diminished responsibility. Ricky was going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. They couldn't give him the death penalty now. They can't kill him now. They can't kill him now. My name is Lorilei. Do you know what that means?